Ava stood in the middle of the crowded airport, her fingers tight around the handle of her suitcase, her passport pressed against her chest like a lifeline. Her heart raced with excitement and nerves. Today was supposed to be the beginning of something magical. Derek had promised her Paris, a trip she had dreamed about since she was a teenager, one she had spent a year saving for. He was the one who said they needed this escape, that it would be their time to reconnect. She kept glancing toward the entrance, expecting to see him walking toward her with his easy smile, maybe flowers in hand. But minutes turned into an hour into 2. Her phone stayed silent. Each time she dialed, it rang and rang until voicemail picked up. Around her, travelers hugged their families, business people rushed with laptops, children laughed and cried. Life moved forward while she stood still, waiting for the man who promised her everything. At the 3rd hour, her phone buzzed. Relief hit her chest. Finally. She unlocked the screen quickly, but her breath caught as her eyes read the short message. I can't do this anymore. Don't call me. That was it. No explanation. No goodbye. Just words that shattered the dream she had clung to for so long. The airport suddenly felt louder, brighter, unbearable. Her knees weakened as if the ground had been pulled from beneath her. People brushed past without noticing her falling apart. Tears blurred her vision, spilling faster than she could stop them. She dropped onto a nearby bench, her suitcase leaning awkwardly beside her, and buried her face in her hands. The trip was gone. The relationship was gone. She was abandoned, left humiliated in the middle of a place where everyone else seemed to belong. Her chest rose and fell in sharp breaths as sobs escaped her. She tried to hold them in, but the harder she tried, the louder they became. She felt like she was unraveling, and there was no one to catch her. Then, softly, a voice broke through the storm. Hey, are you okay? She looked up, startled. A man sat just a few seats away. He looked about 30, maybe a little older, dressed in a neat suit as if he had just come from a meeting. His expression wasn't pity, but calm concern. Without saying more, he reached into the small bag at his feet and held out a bottle of water. Her lips trembled. She wanted to say no, that she was fine, that strangers shouldn't see her like this. But her throat burned and her hands shook as she reached out and took the bottle. Thank you, she whispered, her voice breaking. The man nodded gently, not pressing her for answers. Airports are tough enough even when everything goes right, he said quietly, almost like he knew she needed space, but also needed to hear a voice that wasn't in her own head. Ava held the bottle close, staring at him through tear-filled eyes. For the first time in hours, she felt a small flicker of relief. Someone had noticed. Someone cared enough to ask if she was okay. And even though he was a stranger, his presence steadied her just enough to breathe again. Grew up middle class in Ohio, Ava had always been the one who took care of everyone else. Her father had left when she was 10, and from that day on, she felt she had to grow up faster than other kids her age. Her mother worked 2 jobs to keep the family afloat, and Ava became the second parent in the house, packing lunches, walking her little sister to school, making sure the bills were paid on time. She rarely thought about what she wanted. Her role was to hold things together. College had been a dream she barely managed to touch. She went for 2 years before dropping out to stay home and help her mother when her health began to fail. Friends from school moved to new cities, chased careers, built lives. Ava stayed. She worked long hours as a receptionist at a dental office and came home exhausted, but she told herself it was enough. She didn't need adventure. She didn't need Paris. She just needed stability. Then she met Derek. He walked into her life like a gust of fresh air, with his easy smile, his loud laugh, his promises of something bigger. He was everything she wasn't: confident, charming, ambitious. When he told her she was beautiful, she believed him. When he said he wanted to take care of her, she let herself feel small in a way that almost felt like safety. He became her escape, her ticket to something different. But over time, that escape started to feel like a cage. Derek had a way of brushing off her ideas with a laugh. When she once mentioned wanting to finish college, he said, "Why waste the money? You've got me." If she brought up travel or new hobbies, he would shake his head and say, "Not everything's for everyone. You're lucky I see the best in you." His words were soft enough to sound like love, but sharp enough to cut her down. Slowly, she lost touch with her friends. He didn't like them. He said they didn't understand her. He told her she didn't need anyone but him. And deep down she believed it, because being alone scared her more than being controlled. That's why the airport hurt so much. She had poured her savings, her time, her heart into this trip. She thought Paris would be proof that Derek really cared. Instead, all she had was a text that left her sitting on a bench, sobbing into her hands. When the man in the suit, Michael, offered her water, she felt her face burn with shame. This stranger had seen her at her weakest. She wanted to disappear, to melt into the floor. "I'm sorry," she whispered, embarrassed by her tears. "You don't have to apologize," Michael said gently. His voice was steady, low, like he wasn't trying to fix her but simply to be there. She nodded, twisting the bottle in her hands. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was oddly comfortable, like he understood she didn't have the strength to explain. Michael wasn't the kind of man who filled space with words. He carried himself with a quietness that felt different from Derek's loud, commanding presence. He looked like someone who had seen pain before, though he kept it tucked behind calm eyes. Eventually, when Ava managed to take a sip of water, he asked, "Was it a flight you missed?" She gave a broken laugh. Something like that. The answer hung between them. She didn't want to tell him everything. Not yet. But somehow, she could feel he wouldn't judge her if she did. What she didn't know was that Michael had his own story. He was 32, a lawyer by trade, but lately the sharp lines of his career had blurred. His father had died 2 years ago, and while he was still grieving, his wife had left. She said she couldn't live with the weight of his silence, his sorrow. Since then he had moved through life like someone who had lost his balance but refused to fall. He was visiting family now, trying to remind himself that not everything was broken. Maybe that's why he noticed Ava. Her pain looked familiar. They talked in pieces, little fragments. Ava apologized again for crying, for bothering him. Michael shook his head and said, "You're not bothering me." It wasn't much, but it was more kindness than she had felt in months. Derek always made her feel dramatic, needy, ungrateful. Michael made her feel like it was okay to hurt. She didn't know what would come of it. She didn't even know his last name. But in that moment, as the noise of the airport buzzed around them, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Seen. Ava's phone rang, sharp and loud, cutting through the noisy airport. She wiped at her face quickly and answered, her sister's voice trembling on the other end. "Ava, it's Mom." She collapsed. They rushed her to the hospital. "You need to come now." The world tilted again. Ava stood up, clutching her suitcase with one hand, the phone pressed to her ear with the other. "What? How bad is it?" she whispered, her throat tight. "They don't know yet. Just hurry, please." Her sister's voice cracked before the line went dead. Ava froze. She needed to get home, needed to be at the hospital. But Derek had driven her here earlier and left. She had no car, no plan. She was stranded in the middle of the airport with her life falling apart in 2 directions at once. Her breathing quickened. People streamed past her, dragging luggage, laughing, calling out to one another. But all she could hear was the echo of her sister's words. "Collapsed hospital, hurry." Michael, still seated nearby, had heard enough to understand. He rose slowly and looked at her with quiet steadiness. "You need to get to the hospital," he said softly. "I'm headed that way. Let me drive you." Ava shook her head, panicked. "No. I can't. You don't even know me. I don't want to bother you." "You're not bothering me," Michael said, his tone calm and certain. "It sounds urgent. You shouldn't waste time." Her instinct was to refuse again. She had learned not to trust easily, not after Derek. But she looked at the departure board, at the exits, at the empty space where Derek should have been. She had no choice. "Okay," she whispered. "Thank you." They walked in silence through the terminal, Ava dragging her suitcase with shaky hands. Michael carried nothing but a small leather bag. He led her to a dark sedan in the parking garage and opened the passenger door for her. The first few miles were quiet. The hum of the engine filled the space between them. Ava stared out the window, watching the city blur by, her stomach tight with fear for her mother and anger at Derek. Finally, the words spilled out. "He left me," she said, almost to herself. Michael glanced at her, but kept his eyes mostly on the road. "The man you were waiting for?" Ava nodded, her eyes burning. "We were supposed to go to Paris. I saved for it. I thought it was our chance to fix everything." Instead, he sent me a text. A text. Her voice cracked. He just ended it. Like I wasn't worth more than a few words on a screen. She gripped her hands together in her lap. I've given up so much for him. My friends, my plans, even school. I thought if I tried hard enough, he'd love me the way I loved him. But I was wrong. I was nothing to him. The tears came again, and she turned her face to the window so Michael wouldn't have to see. But he didn't look uncomfortable. He didn't rush her to stop. He simply drove, steady and quiet, giving her space. After a long silence, he spoke. My ex-wife left me after my father died. His voice was even, but Eva caught a flicker of pain beneath it. She said I wasn't the same person anymore. That I was too heavy to love. One day, she just packed her things and was gone. No warning. No fight. Just gone. Eva turned her head, surprised he had shared something so personal. He continued, his eyes on the road. I know what it's like to feel replaceable. To wonder if you were ever enough in the first place. Her chest tightened. Hearing those words from him, this stranger who seemed so calm and put together, made her feel less alone. I feel like I'm invisible without him, she admitted. Michael shook his head gently. You're not invisible. You're hurting. That's different. The words settled over her like a blanket. For the first time since the text, she felt a thread of comfort. He wasn't promising to fix her pain. He wasn't telling her to get over it. He was simply saying it mattered. The rest of the drive passed in quiet, but it was a softer silence now. Not empty. Not lonely. Just shared. By the time they reached the hospital, Eva knew one thing for certain. She wasn't facing this night completely alone. Eva returns home with heavy shoulders and an even heavier heart. The hospital visits drained her. Her mother lay in a bed hooked to machines, weak but fighting. Bills piled up on the kitchen table. Numbers she could barely look at without her chest tightening. And through all of it, Derek stayed silent. No call, no message, nothing. The man she thought would be her partner had left her in every way that mattered. Her phone buzzed late one night with a message from a friend. Out of habit, she opened it, only to see screenshots she wished she hadn't. Derek had been cheating on her for months. Pictures of him smiling with another woman. Texts where he mocked Eva for being clingy and too much. Her stomach twisted as she scrolled. What hurt most wasn't just Derek. It was realizing her friends had known and never told her. The betrayal cut deeper than she thought possible. She wasn't only abandoned, she had been lied to. The next morning, Michael showed up outside her house with 2 coffees. You looked like you could use one, he said simply when she opened the door, her hair messy, her eyes tired. She wanted to cry at the thoughtfulness, but instead she just whispered, "Thank you." It became a pattern. Michael would drive her to the hospital when she didn't have the strength. He'd sit with her in the waiting room, not asking questions, just being there. Sometimes he'd bring soup or carry groceries inside. Always quiet, never demanding. He didn't ask her to talk about Derek, didn't ask for her time, didn't expect anything back. One evening, her sister watched Michael leave after dropping Ava off. A small smile tugged at her lips. That man cares about you, you know, she teased gently. Ava shook her head quickly, her chest tightening. No, he's just being kind. I can't. She stopped, her voice breaking. I can't lean on him like that. I'll end up depending on him the way I depended on Derek. And then when he leaves, her throat closed. I'll fall apart all over again. Her sister's smile softened, but she didn't argue. She just touched Ava's hand and said, "Not everyone leaves." Still, guilt gnawed at her. Every time Michael showed up, part of her heart warmed, but another part whispered that she was using him, that she didn't deserve his care. She had built her life around Derek, and look how that ended. What if she was repeating the same mistake? Days later, Derek finally reappeared. He called her while she was walking out of the hospital. For a moment her heart leapt. It was reflex, the old pull she hated but couldn't deny. His voice was smooth, almost smug. Thought you'd reach out by now, he said casually. I figured you needed time to cool off. Ava gripped the phone tighter. You left me at an airport, she said, her voice shaking. He laughed. Oh, come on. You'll come crawling back. You always do. The words hit her like a slap. She wanted to scream at him, to tell him he was wrong. But deep down, part of her feared he was right. That old weakness tugged at her, the fear of being alone. She hung up, but his voice echoed in her chest long after. That evening, Michael noticed her silence as he drove her home. Finally he asked, "What happened?" Ava hesitated, then whispered, "Derek called. He said I'd come crawling back. And the worst part is, I almost believe him." Her voice cracked. "Why do I believe him more than I believe myself?" Michael's hands tightened slightly on the wheel. His tone was gentle but firm. "Because he taught you to. He spent years making you think his voice mattered more than yours. But that doesn't make it true." Her breath hitched. Anger surged, not at him, but at herself, for letting Derek still hold power, for feeling weak in front of someone who had been nothing but kind. "Stop," she snapped suddenly, louder than she meant to. "You don't get it. You don't know what it's like to give everything and still feel like nothing." Her eyes burned as tears spilled. "Don't sit there acting like you can fix me with calm words." Michael didn't flinch. He didn't argue. He simply pulled the car over, turned off the engine, and looked at her. "I'm not trying to fix you, Ava. I just don't want you to forget who you are." That made it worse somehow. She couldn't take the kindness, couldn't take the patience. It was too much. She pushed the door open, storming out onto the sidewalk, her chest heaving. Michael stayed in the car, his eyes following her but not chasing. He knew she needed space. Ava walked fast, wiping her tears with angry hands. Anger at Derek, anger at herself, and now anger at Michael. For being steady, for being there, for making her hope when she wasn't ready to. Her world felt like it was splitting in two, past and present, fear and possibility, and she didn't know which side she wanted to choose. Hospital bills skyrocket. Every time Ava opened another envelope, her stomach dropped. Numbers covered the pages, numbers she had no way to pay. Insurance only covered part of it, and her mother needed treatment every single day. Ava felt the walls of her life closing in on her. Out of desperation, she called Derek. Maybe, just maybe, he would care enough to help with the bills. He had always been good with money, always had more than she did. But when he answered, his voice was cold, almost amused. "You really think I'm going to pay for your mess?" he said. "Our mess?" Ava shot back. "We were supposed to be a team." He laughed, sharp and cruel. "We were never a team. You depended on me for everything. And look at you now, you still do." Pathetic. Something cracked inside Ava. For years, she had swallowed his insults, told herself they were jokes, or that he didn't mean them. But standing there, with the weight of her mother's life pressing down on her, she finally saw him clearly. Later that week, she spotted him in the hospital cafeteria. He was leaning against a counter, coffee in hand, looking smug as if the world owed him something. Her chest filled with fire. She marched toward him, her steps heavy but steady. "You think I'm pathetic?" she said, her voice shaking but loud enough to turn heads. Derek raised an eyebrow, smirking. "Well, aren't you? Look at you. Crying at airports. Begging me to come back. Calling me for money. You'll never stand on your own, Ava. You need me." The words rang through her like a bell. But instead of breaking her, they pushed her higher. Her voice rose, raw and fierce, echoing through the cafeteria. "No. I don't need you. Not anymore." Her eyes burned, but her voice didn't waver. "You think you broke me, but you didn't. You just made me see I deserve more than this. More than you. I wasted years believing your lies, letting you shrink me. But I'm done. You don't get to control me anymore." The room went quiet. A nurse at a nearby table looked up. A man sipping soup froze mid-bite. Derek's smirk faltered for the first time. "You're making a scene," he muttered, glancing around nervously. "Good," Ava said, her voice rising. "Maybe people should see the man who thinks tearing down a woman makes him strong. Maybe you should feel what it's like to be humiliated for once." Derek's face reddened. His jaw tightened. "You'll regret this," he hissed, but his voice cracked under the weight of her fire. "No," Ava said firmly. "I regret ever giving you so much of me. That ends today." Fury flashed in his eyes, but he had nothing left to throw at her. For the first time, he was the one who couldn't hold the ground. With a sharp turn, he stormed out of the cafeteria, the door swinging shut behind him. The silence that followed was heavy, but Ava stood taller than she had in years. Her hands shook, her chest heaved, but she didn't crumble. She had faced him and won. From the corner, Michael had watched the whole thing. He hadn't stepped in, hadn't interrupted. He simply stood near enough to be there if she needed him, but far enough to let her own strength rise. As soon as Derek was gone, the fire in Ava's chest gave way to trembling. She sat down at a table, covering her face with her hands, and for the first time the tears weren't about pain. They were about release. Years of swallowed words had finally been spoken. Michael walked over slowly and sat across from her. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Ava looked up at him, her cheeks wet. "I feel lighter," she whispered, almost in disbelief. "Like I've been carrying him around on my back, and he's finally gone." Michael nodded once, his eyes calm, steady. She leaned back in her chair, the weight sliding off her shoulders, tears still falling but softer now. They weren't tears for Derek. They were tears for herself, tears of freedom, of finally breaking the chains she thought she'd never escape. Michael didn't reach across the table, didn't try to wipe her tears. He simply stayed, his presence a quiet anchor in the storm. And for the first time, Ava realized she wasn't afraid of being alone, because she wasn't truly alone anymore. She had herself, and that was enough. Ava sets boundaries with Derek. She answers his calls only once, calm and firm. "Don't contact me again unless it's about something important," she says. Her voice does not shake this time. Derek laughs, calls her cold, but she ends the call and blocks his number. For the first time, she feels light. At the same time, she starts looking for a better job. She updates her resume late at night, sends applications, and even goes to interviews. She is nervous, but also proud of herself. "I'm not waiting for anyone to save me," she whispers while practicing answers in the mirror. Her sister notices the change. Instead of Ava always carrying the weight of their mother's hospital care alone, her sister begins helping with bills and appointments. Ava finally accepts the help. For years she thought saying yes meant weakness, but now she sees it as strength. Michael remains close, quietly supportive. He brings food when he knows Ava has not eaten. He drives her to the hospital when her car breaks down. He listens when she talks, and stays silent when she just needs company. One evening, Ava sits with him outside the hospital. The air is cool, and the night feels calm after a stormy day. She takes a deep breath. "Michael, I need to say this. I care about you, but I don't want to lean on you for everything. If I do, I'll never know I can walk alone." Michael looks at her, steady and warm. "Then I'll walk beside you," he says simply. He doesn't argue. He doesn't push. He just respects her choice. That respect strengthens their bond more than anything else. Ava realizes she is not being pulled forward by someone else. She is moving forward by herself, but Michael is there, walking beside her. Days turn into weeks, and Ava slowly rebuilds her confidence. She starts smiling more often. She laughs with her sister. She makes plans for the future. One morning, she gets a call. She has been offered a new job. Not the perfect job, but a better one, with fair pay and growth opportunities. She accepts, her hands shaking with joy. That night, she stands in her small kitchen, cooking dinner for herself and her sister. The house feels brighter than it has in years. She looks at the table. 2 plates, laughter filling the air. And she knows she is no longer the woman who once cried alone in an airport, waiting for someone who never showed up. She is Ava, a woman who survived heartbreak, betrayal, and loss, but who chose to rise anyway. She doesn't know exactly what the future holds with Michael, but for the first time, she is not afraid. She knows she can stand on her own. And that makes whatever comes next a choice, not a need. And in that quiet strength, Ava finally feels free. Ava stood at the same airport where her world had fallen apart weeks ago. But this time, she wasn't trembling, abandoned, or humiliated. She was holding her own passport, her own ticket, and her own choice. Paris, a trip she had once only dreamed about, but never dared to take. She rolled her small suitcase behind her, the sound of the wheels steady against the airport floor. It was a different sound than before, not heavy, not dragging, but light. Her heart was still nervous, yes, but not with fear. It was excitement. When she reached her gate, she sat down by the window and watched the planes take off. Each one reminded her of something she had finally understood. Life wasn't about waiting for someone else to rescue her. It was about learning she could fly on her own. Her phone buzzed. For a second, her chest tightened. Old habits. For years, every buzz had meant Derek's words, sharp, demanding, or dismissive. But this time it wasn't him. It was Michael. The message was simple: safe travels. I'll be here when you get back. Ava read it twice, then let out a soft laugh. He didn't beg her to stay. He didn't try to control her. He didn't even ask for anything. He just reminded her she wasn't alone, but also free to go. Her sister had hugged her earlier that morning saying, "You're stronger than you think." And Ava finally believed it. She slipped her phone into her bag and took a deep breath. The loudspeaker announced her flight boarding, and she stood. This time, no one was pulling away from her. No one was walking out of her life. She was the one walking forward, by choice. As she handed over her ticket and stepped onto the jet bridge, a calm smile spread across her face. She didn't need Derek's approval. She didn't even need the world's applause. She had herself. The plane door closed behind her, and she settled into her seat by the window. Paris was waiting, not as an escape, but as a beginning. She pressed her forehead gently against the glass, watching the runway lights glow in the fading evening. Her chest felt lighter than it had in years. The final thought rose in her mind, clear and steady, as the engines roared to life. For the first time, she wasn't waiting to be chosen. She had already chosen herself. Hey loves, thanks for staying till the end. Sparkling heart, don't forget to like, share and subscribe for more stories. See you in the next one.